Prince Harry sat in that London courtroom, smug and confident, ready to take down the Daily Mail empire. Then his own lawyer handed the opposing counsel the loaded gun, and that gun was called Spare. The very memoir Harry bragged about being a record-breaking bestseller, the book he claimed was his truth and nothing but his truth, is now being wielded against him with devastating precision. And folks, watching the color drain from his face as his own published words were read back to him might just be the most satisfying moment of karmic justice we have witnessed in years. Let us be absolutely clear about what happened in that courtroom. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the man who has spent years positioning himself as a victim of media persecution, took the stand and denied having certain conversations. He looked the court directly in the eye and said those discussions never happened. And then, with what must have been barely concealed glee, the Daily Mail's legal team opened up a copy of Spare and proceeded to read passages where Harry himself described those exact conversations in vivid, publishable detail. You cannot make this stuff up. The man literally wrote a $20 million confession and then forgot what was in it. The irony here is so thick you could choke on it. Harry spent months on his book tour bragging about how Spare was the most honest account of royal life ever written. He sat across from interviewers and insisted that every single word was accurate, that he had fact-checkers, that this was his definitive truth. Well, congratulations, Harry. The Daily Mail's lawyers apparently believed you. They believed you so much that they are now using your own definitive truth to prove you are lying under oath. Let that sink in for a moment. Sources close to the legal proceedings described the moment as nothing short of catastrophic for Harry's credibility. One courtroom observer put it bluntly, saying he looked like a man who just realized he had been playing chess while everyone else was playing three-dimensional warfare. Another insider noted that the expression on Harry's face when his own words were read back suggested he genuinely had not anticipated this strategy. And honestly, that might be the most damning indictment of all. Did no one on his legal team bother to cross-reference his testimony with his best-selling autobiography? Did Harry himself not remember what he wrote? But his book contradicting his testimony was just the beginning of his courtroom catastrophe. The scope of Prince Harry's legal disaster cannot be overstated, and what we are witnessing is not just a bad day in court. This is the potential collapse of years of legal strategy, millions upon millions of pounds, and whatever remained of Harry's credibility as a public figure. Multiple mistakes are compounding into what legal experts are calling an unprecedented self-inflicted wound, and the damage may be entirely irreversible. Let us talk about the financial elephant in the room, because the judge himself felt compelled to issue an extraordinary warning. The claimants in this case, including Harry, have already spent an absolutely staggering £40 million in legal costs. 40 million. That is not a typo. That is the kind of money that could fund entire humanitarian operations, build schools, provide clean water to developing nations. Instead, it has been funneled into what is increasingly looking like a vanity project, driven by one man's insatiable need for revenge against the media that he believes wronged him. The judge's warning was not subtle. He made it explicitly clear that if the claimants lose this case, they could be personally liable for a significant portion of those costs. For Harry, a man whose financial empire is built on increasingly shaky foundations, this represents an existential threat. His Netflix deal is reportedly underperforming. His Spotify partnership crashed and burned spectacularly. His speaking engagements have dried up, and now he faces the very real possibility of being on the hook for tens of millions of pounds in legal fees. Insiders are describing the situation as a slow-motion train wreck that nobody can look away from. One source familiar with the legal proceedings stated that Harry's team appears to have fundamentally miscalculated the strength of their position. Another person close to the matter suggested that the prince seemed genuinely shocked by how thoroughly prepared the defense was, as if he expected them to simply roll over in the face of royal displeasure. Allow me to translate that for you. Harry walked into that courtroom expecting deference, and instead received a masterclass in legal humiliation. The central question now consuming legal observers, royal watchers, and frankly anyone paying attention is whether Harry's testimony has destroyed any chance of winning this case. His credibility, the foundation upon which his entire claim rests, has been shattered into a million pieces on that courtroom floor. And once credibility is gone in a legal proceeding, it does not come back. Judges remember, juries remember, the record remembers forever. The financial implications extend far beyond this single case. Harry has positioned himself as a crusader against media corruption, a warrior for truth and accountability. If he loses this lawsuit and loses badly, every future legal venture becomes exponentially more difficult. Who will fund his battles? Who will take his claims seriously? Who will believe the man whose own book proved he was willing to say one thing in court and write another for profit? And when the Daily Mail's lawyers started pulling quotes from Spare, Harry's face told the whole story. The specific moment that may have sealed Harry's fate involves a conversation he swore never happened. When questioned about discussions with his ex-girlfriend Chelsea Davy during a trip to Botswana, Harry was emphatic. He denied that certain private exchanges had taken place, insisted that the media had fabricated or exaggerated the details, and positioned himself as the victim of journalistic invention. Then came the devastating counterpunch. The Daily Mail's legal team calmly opened Spare to the relevant pages and began reading aloud. There, in Harry's own voice, in his own carefully chosen words, in his $20 million memoir that he assured the world was completely accurate, were detailed descriptions of those exact conversations by a campfire in Botswana. The exchanges he denied having were there in black and white, published for the entire world to read, verified by his own hand. One legal commentator noted that various details of conversations he denied having took place he wrote about in his autobiography. The contradiction could not have been more stark. For those unfamiliar with legal proceedings, let me explain why this matters so profoundly. When you take the stand and swear to tell the truth, and then your own published writings directly contradict that testimony, you have created what lawyers call a serious credibility problem. But folks, this goes beyond mere credibility issues. We are potentially talking about perjury. Lying under oath is not a small matter. It is a criminal offense that carries real consequences, even for princes who believe they are above such mundane concerns. The comparison to the infamous Agatha Christie trial is impossible to ignore. In that case, Rebecca Vardy took the stand and made claims that were subsequently demolished by her own WhatsApp messages. The messages showed a pattern of behavior completely at odds with her sworn testimony, and her credibility never recovered. Harry now finds himself in an eerily similar position, hoisted by his own petard, destroyed not by his enemies, but by his own compulsive need to share every detail of his life for profit. Sources inside the courtroom described the atmosphere as electric when the Spare passages were read aloud. One observer stated that you could physically see Harry's confidence evaporating in real time. Another noted that his legal team appeared visibly uncomfortable, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact with their client. The implication was clear. They had not anticipated this line of attack, or if they had, they drastically underestimated its effectiveness. What makes this particularly devastating is that Harry had every opportunity to reconcile his testimony with his book. He knew Spare existed. He knew what was in it. He presumably had access to legal counsel, who could have advised him on potential contradictions. And yet here we are, watching a prince implode on the witness stand because he apparently forgot his own bestseller. But the Spare contradictions were not the only way Harry torpedoed his credibility. The presiding judge in this case has demonstrated remarkable patience, but even judicial temperament has its limits. Multiple times during Harry's testimony, the court was forced to intervene as the prince engaged in behavior that can only be described as combative, argumentative, and fundamentally disrespectful of the legal process. This was not a man seeking justice. This was a man seeking a fight, and the courtroom was having none of it. The judge's rebuke cut straight to the heart of the matter. He told Harry directly that he was doing exactly what lots of litigants do, which is argue back to the barrister. Let us be brutally honest about what that means. The judge essentially told a member of the royal family that he was behaving like every other entitled person who thinks they know better than the legal professionals. He was behaving like an amateur, like someone who watched too many courtroom dramas and thought cross-examination was an opportunity for verbal sparring rather than truth-seeking. Observers in the courtroom painted a damning picture of Harry's demeanor throughout the proceedings. One journalist described him as looking like a pub prowler, desperate for a fight, someone who came spoiling for confrontation and could not control his impulses when challenged. Another noted that his body language suggested barely contained rage, as if he took personal offense at every question designed to test his claims. This is not how innocent people behave. This is how people behave when they know they have something to hide. The pattern of judicial intervention speaks volumes. A judge does not repeatedly step in to correct a witness unless that witness is causing significant problems. Each rebuke represents a moment where Harry's behavior threatened to derail the proceedings, where his ego overrode his common sense, where his desire to win arguments overshadowed his obligation to answer questions truthfully and directly. Multiple interventions suggest a witness who simply cannot or will not follow the rules. Speculation has naturally turned to who might have coached Harry for this courtroom appearance. Sources close to the Sussex camp have long suggested that Meghan plays a significant role in preparing Harry for public encounters, shaping his messaging and approach. If that is the case here, the strategy backfired spectacularly. Courtrooms are not talk show stages. Judges are not friendly interviewers. The combative approach that might generate sympathetic headlines plays very differently when you are under oath and facing skilled legal opponents. One legal analyst put it perfectly, noting that Harry seemed to confuse the courtroom with a public relations battlefield. He appeared to think that winning the argument in the moment was more important than building a coherent legal case. And in that confusion, he may have handed his opponents everything they needed to destroy him. Every time he argued instead of answered, every time the judge had to step in, every time his temper flared, his credibility took another hit. Then came the tears, and nobody was buying them. The moment Prince Harry's eyes welled up with emotion should have been a powerful turning point in his testimony. Here was a man so deeply wounded by media intrusion that he could barely contain his grief. Here was vulnerability, humanity, the raw pain of someone who had suffered immensely. There was just one small problem. The tears came at the wrong time, about the wrong person, in a case where the timing made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Harry's emotional display centered on Meghan Markle, his wife, his partner, his co-conspirator, and all things anti-media. He choked up describing her suffering, her persecution, the toll the tabloid coverage had taken on their relationship. Touching stuff, truly heartwarming, except for one glaring issue that everyone in that courtroom immediately noticed. This lawsuit concerns events that predated his relationship with Meghan. The timeline does not match. He was crying about someone who is essentially irrelevant to the actual legal claims being adjudicated. Let that sink in for a moment. Harry had an opportunity to show genuine emotion about the actual subjects of this lawsuit, about the real harms he claims to have suffered during the relevant time period. Instead, he chose to pivot to Meghan, a woman he had not even met when many of these alleged privacy violations occurred. It was as if he could not resist making everything about their current narrative, even when that narrative had nothing to do with the matter at hand. The timing of the tears raised even more eyebrows among courtroom observers. The emotional moment came during questioning from his own lawyer, not during cross-examination. Allow me to translate that for those unfamiliar with legal proceedings. He cried during the rehearsed portion, the friendly questions, the softballs lobbed by his own team. One source described it as literally rehearsed, noting that tears appearing during your own lawyer's questions is usually a sign of prepared testimony rather than genuine emotion. Media commentators were not remotely fooled by the performance. Reports described the emotional display as the final act of a lightning-fast day, suggesting it was a calculated attempt to generate sympathetic coverage rather than a spontaneous outpouring of grief. When a room full of journalists, people whose job is to observe and report, unanimously conclude that your tears are fake, you have a credibility problem that no amount of actual crying can fix. The damage to Harry's case from this theatrical moment may be substantial. Juries and judges are not stupid. They can tell the difference between genuine emotion and performance. They notice when tears appear strategically, when grief is deployed tactically, when vulnerability seems scripted rather than real. Harry's crocodile tears may have generated a headline or two, but they also confirmed what many suspected. This is a man more interested in public relations than justice. But Harry's hypocrisy ran even deeper than crocodile tears. The absolute audacity of Prince Harry complaining about the commercialization of his life would be hilarious if it were not so breathtakingly hypocritical. There he sat in that courtroom, lamenting how the Daily Mail had exploited his personal experiences for profit, how they had turned his pain into their product, how they had commodified his very existence, and all the while the evidence of his own massive commercialization empire sat right there in the public record. Let us do the math, shall we? Spare, his tell-all memoir that spared absolutely no one, reportedly earned him a $20 million advance. His Netflix deal, the one that produced the documentary series where he and Meghan complained endlessly about privacy while filming themselves constantly, was worth approximately $100 million. His Spotify partnership, the one that produced barely any content before being quietly terminated, brought in another $20 million. And that is before we count the countless paid interviews, speaking engagements, and media appearances that have filled Sussex coffers since their departure from royal life. One commentator absolutely nailed the contradiction with devastating precision. Camilla Tominay observed that no newspaper has ever cashed in on Prince Harry's private life more effectively than Prince Harry himself. Read that again. Let it really sink in. The man suing newspapers for monetizing his experiences has monetized those same experiences more aggressively and more profitably than any tabloid could ever dream. He is not a victim of commercialization. He is its most successful practitioner. But the hypocrisy goes even deeper, and this detail is truly extraordinary. Harry authorized Daily Mail journalist Alison Boshoff to speak on his behalf during the course of his legal battle against the Daily Mail. He literally used the publication he is suing as a communications vehicle for his own messaging. If that is not the definition of wanting it both ways, I honestly do not know what is. He wants to destroy them in court, while simultaneously using them for his own purposes when convenient. Sources close to the legal proceedings have noted that this contradiction featured prominently in cross-examination. The defense hammered home the point that Harry cannot credibly claim to be a victim of media exploitation, while simultaneously being the media's most willing collaborator when it suits his financial interests. One insider described the moment as devastating to Harry's narrative, noting that his lawyers appeared to have no satisfactory response to the obvious double standard. The financial numbers alone tell the story of breathtaking hypocrisy. While claiming the Daily Mail ruined his life, Harry has earned well over $150 million directly from sharing that supposedly ruined life with the public. He has appeared on Oprah, he has filmed documentary series, he has written books, he has given interview after interview. Every single one of these activities involved selling his personal experiences for money. The audacity of then claiming victimhood when others report on those same experiences is genuinely staggering. And his claim that the royal family prevented him from suing? Completely demolished. One of the central pillars of Harry's lawsuit has been the assertion that he was prevented from taking legal action against the media while serving as a working royal. The families never complain, never explain policy, he claimed, kept him shackled, unable to defend himself against media attacks, forced to suffer in silence while tabloids printed whatever they wanted about him. It is a compelling narrative. It positions Harry as a victim of both the media and his own family. There is just one tiny problem. It is demonstrably, provably, embarrassingly false. Prince William, Harry's own brother, successfully sued media outlets for privacy violations while serving as a working royal, not once but multiple times. William and Catherine took legal action against Paris Match and won. They sued Closer magazine and secured damages. They demonstrated repeatedly that the royal family's unofficial policy did not prevent them from seeking justice through the courts when their privacy was genuinely violated. The precedent exists. The evidence is clear. Harry's excuse has been utterly demolished. Let us be brutally honest about what this means. Harry either lied about being prevented from suing, or he was so disengaged from his own family's activities that he genuinely did not know his brother had successfully pursued multiple media lawsuits. Neither option reflects well on him. Either he is dishonest, or he is spectacularly uninformed about matters directly relevant to his own legal claims. Take your pick. Both are damning. The implications for Harry's testimony are severe. When you build a case on the foundation of being uniquely victimized, and that foundation turns out to be quicksand, your entire argument collapses. Harry positioned himself as someone who desperately wanted to fight back but was institutionally prevented from doing so. The reality is that his brother found ways to fight back successfully, repeatedly, while maintaining his position within the family. What does that say about Harry's own choices? Sources familiar with royal legal matters have shed light on why William's lawsuit succeeded where Harry apparently believed none were possible. The key difference, they suggest, was discretion. William pursued legal action quietly, without fanfare, without turning every case into a public relations campaign. He let the lawyers do their work and kept his own commentary to a minimum. Harry, by contrast, seems constitutionally incapable of pursuing any course of action without maximum publicity and maximum drama. One royal insider was particularly blunt in their assessment, suggesting that Harry did not want to sue quietly because quiet victories do not generate headlines. The implication is devastating. If true, it suggests that Harry's legal battles are less about justice and more about attention, less about righting wrongs and more about maintaining relevance. When your own brother has proven that the path you claimed was closed was actually wide open, you have some explaining to do. Meanwhile, Harry was desperately hoping for a different kind of royal response. The most pathetic revelation to emerge from Harry's London visit involves not what happened in the courtroom, but what happened outside of it. Sources close to the situation have confirmed that throughout his time in the United Kingdom, Harry checked daily, sometimes multiple times per day, to see whether Prince William or King Charles had reached out to make contact. Spoiler alert, they did not. The silence from his family was deafening, and apparently, it crushed him. Let that sink in for a moment. Here is a man who has spent years publicly attacking his family, accusing them of racism, of neglect, of failing to protect him and his wife. He has written books exposing their private conversations. He has filmed documentaries airing their dirty laundry. He has given interview after interview painting them as villains in his personal narrative. And then he sits in London checking his phone like a teenager waiting for a text from an ex, hoping desperately that they will reach out and reconcile. The emotional comments Harry made at the Invictus Games shortly before his court appearance now take on a different light entirely. Sources suggest these public statements were strategically designed to trigger a family response, to create a moment of vulnerability that might inspire William or Charles to extend an olive branch. It was, insiders say, a calculated play disguised as spontaneous emotion, but the family saw through it. They remained silent, and Harry was left with nothing but his own embarrassment. The scene at his court appearance made the isolation painfully visible. Instead of sitting alongside family members or longtime royal associates, Harry found himself with Damien Hurley, son of Elizabeth Hurley, as his most notable companion. Nothing against Damien Hurley, but when you are the son of a king, and your courtroom support system consists of a celebrity's offspring rather than any blood relatives, the optics are absolutely brutal. It screams loneliness, desperation, and the consequences of burning every bridge in sight. Legal observers and psychologists alike have begun speculating about the underlying motivations for Harry's entire legal crusade. Some suggest that the lawsuit itself may be less about media accountability and more about forcing the family to pay attention. One analyst described it as an elaborate cry for help disguised as a quest for justice. Another noted that Harry seems to crave any form of engagement with his family, even negative engagement, and litigation creates circumstances where they cannot ignore him entirely. The tragedy, if we can call it that, is that Harry appears to genuinely not understand why his family maintains their distance. He seems to believe that they should separate his public attacks from their private relationship, that he can call them racists on global television and still expect warm family reunions. This disconnect from reality suggests a level of narcissism or denial that no amount of courtroom drama is likely to address. But the royal family's silence spoke volumes about Harry's future. The financial catastrophe bearing down on Prince Harry deserves its own moment of scrutiny, because the numbers are genuinely staggering. The £40 million already spent on legal fees in this case represents an unprecedented sum, and the judge's explicit warning to claimants about their potential exposure suggests that significant personal liability could be heading Harry's way. For a man whose income streams are drying up faster than a puddle in the Sahara, this represents an existential threat. Let us break down the mathematics of potential disaster. If Harry's case collapses, and the evidence increasingly suggests it might, he could be personally liable for a substantial portion of those legal costs. We are potentially talking about tens of millions of pounds. His Netflix deal, while impressive on paper, has not delivered the expected returns. The documentary series underperformed. The Spare adaptation has stalled. The streaming giant is reportedly questioning whether the Sussex brand delivers value commensurate with its cost. The Spotify disaster speaks volumes about Harry's marketability. $20 million for a partnership that produced virtually no content before being quietly terminated. Spotify executives reportedly described the Sussexes as grifters, people who take the money but do not deliver the work. That reputation follows you in Hollywood. It makes future deals harder to secure, less lucrative when they do materialize, and more likely to include performance clauses that actually require performance. Sources in the entertainment industry paint a grim picture of Harry's commercial prospects. One insider noted that he has essentially burned through the goodwill that came with his initial departure from royal life. The narrative of the prince who walked away from duty for love was compelling. The reality of a bitter man endlessly relitigating family grievances is considerably less appealing. Studios and streamers are reportedly wary of further Sussex projects, concerned about returns and exhausted by the constant drama. The Invictus Games represent perhaps Harry's most genuine accomplishment, but even that vehicle has limitations. It generates goodwill but not significant revenue. It maintains his profile but does not fill his bank accounts. And as his legal costs mount and his entertainment deals falter, the question becomes increasingly urgent. How exactly will Harry pay for his expensive California lifestyle, his security requirements, his legal battles, and his wife's considerable spending habits? One financial analyst familiar with celebrity economics offered a sobering assessment. He suggested that Harry is burning through capital at a rate that is simply unsustainable given his current income trajectory. Unless something changes dramatically, and soon, the prince may find himself in genuinely difficult financial circumstances. The notion of a royal prince facing money troubles might seem absurd, but Harry has systematically cut himself off from the traditional support systems that would normally protect someone in his position. And now the question everyone is asking. The cascading disasters of Harry's courtroom appearance have crystallized something that royal observers have long suspected. We are witnessing a man in the midst of complete self-destruction, and he seems entirely unable or unwilling to stop himself. The spare contradictions that proved he cannot keep his own story straight, the fake tears that fooled no one and damaged whatever credibility remained, the judge's repeated rebukes that exposed his inability to control his temper, the hypocrisy of complaining about commercialization while being the greatest commercializer of his own life. Each element builds on the others to create a portrait of catastrophic judgment. This courtroom humiliation does not exist in isolation. It connects directly to a broader pattern of self-sabotage that has defined Harry's post-royal existence. The Netflix documentary that promised revelation but delivered repetition, the Spotify partnership that collapsed amid accusations of insufficient effort, the memoir that burned bridges with everyone he might someday need, the interviews that keep coming, each one somehow managing to make things worse rather than better. Harry has developed a genuine talent for stepping on rakes. The family estrangement, once positioned as a noble sacrifice for love and freedom, now looks increasingly like the natural consequence of unconscionable behavior. You cannot call your father's wife names on global television and expect warm Christmas cards. You cannot accuse your sister-in-law of making your wife cry based on disputed accounts and expect her to welcome you back. You cannot reveal private conversations with your dying grandmother and expect your brother to forgive you. The isolation Harry now experiences is entirely self-created. What happens next for the Duke of Sussex remains genuinely unclear. A loss in this lawsuit could mean financial devastation, with personal liability potentially running into the tens of millions. His reputation, already battered, would sustain what might be a fatal blow. His credibility as a media critic would be destroyed. His position as a serious public figure would become untenable. He would be reduced to exactly what his critics have always claimed he is, a bitter man trading on his birth while accomplishing nothing of substance. The question that observers are now asking is whether recovery is even possible. Has Harry crossed too many lines, burned too many bridges, told too many contradictory stories to ever rebuild his standing. The evidence suggests that the hole he has dug for himself may simply be too deep. Every attempt to climb out seems to result in him digging deeper. Every opportunity for course correction is rejected in favor of doubling down on disaster. Do you think Harry will ever recover from this courtroom humiliation? Can he salvage what remains of his reputation, his finances, his family relationships? Or are we witnessing the final chapters of a prince who had everything and systematically threw it all away? Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video is waiting, and you will not believe what is coming next.